Pull up a little bit. Let's move him in. Let's move him into middle adulthood. It's time to grow up. Middle adulthood runs from age 40 to 65. Traditionally, it may be the most productive period of a person's life, though the end of middle age probably signals retirement. There are potentially many changes during this time period that point toward a slowing down. Um, yeah, this is right after if you're a female, you're potentially no longer reproductive. The minute you go through menopause at this time, as far as males are concerned, they can have babies up until they die. Well, kinda. They things do slow down for them too, and we'll talk about the testosterone and estradiol and whatnot. But yeah, this is the time. These are 40-year-olds. They don't look like 40-year-olds, do they? He does. Well, that's about it. Ageism is unreasonable and irrational beliefs concerning people as they age. Modern society relishes youth and denigrates aging. Physical attractiveness is defined by youth, and people insult those who show signs of not fitting into their definition of attractive. People research, I'm sorry, people reaching middle age will spend tremendous amounts of money to appear younger. There are reasons why the aging process is not well understood. There are many factors that are tied into that, which include life trauma, the environment that you live in, the diet that you have consumed, the debts that you've accrued if you're a drinker or a smoker or you've taken drugs, and genetics. Now, I hate to tell you this, but if you've done any of these things, tobacco, alcohol, or any type of drug, most types of drugs, it will change who you will become as you get older. You will accrue a debt, and there is nothing you can do. It is a debt that has to be paid, and it will be paid as you get older. And then, of course, genetics. Genetically, I'm kind of lucky because both my parents lived into their 90s. It's very common on both sides of my family for people to live into their 90s and even their hundreds. So genetically, I'm in pretty good shape. Genetically, I wasn't real crazy about what was going on with me because I was a late bloomer. I looked like I was 12 years old into my 30s, so I had to grow a mustache. I was teaching junior high school at the time, and I looked like one of my students until I grew my mustache. And it wasn't much of a mustache, let me tell you. Okay, so the environment that you live in. This is actually a picture of Fort Belknap Reservation, uh, looking south toward toward the southern end of the reservation. The food that you eat, and you can see that these kids may be having problems in their future. The traumas that you've lived through, and what you've done to yourself throughout your life. Life expectancy is a statistical figure as to how long an individual can expect to live. It is actually a statistical average of how long people do live. Every country has its own life expectancy. Third world countries tend to have significantly lower life expectancies than industrialized countries. The countries with the lowest life expectancies are all African countries. Malawi, 37.6, Mozambique, 37.5, and Zambia, 37.2. When I was born in 1949, my life expectancy was 59. Now you may want it's approaching 70 now in the United States, and you might wonder, well, why in the world was it so low back in 1949? A lot of it has to do with defeating childhood illnesses. That's all of your vaccinations. I had chickenpox, I had measles, and there were no vaccinations for any of these things. Polio was rampant when I was born, and they didn't come up with the vaccination until 1953. I was born in 1949. What else was happening? Cigarettes were very common. About half the people in the United States smoked cigarettes. And of course, all of these things accumulate to add and subtract years from your life. Um, just before the Soviet Union collapsed, they put a limit on how much vodka men could drink. And as soon as the Soviet Union collapsed, of course, all of those restrictions were gone, and men started drinking like crazy. They lost 6 years of life expectancy in 3 years because of all the heavy drinking that was being done. These are just examples of what can happen. When I lived on the Fort Belknap Reservation, we would get statistics as to life expectancies for whites in the area, and life expectancies for American Indians in the area, and the life expectancy difference between the life expectancies for whites and American Indians was 20 years. Now you might go, wait a minute, what's going on? What was going on was that a lot of the native kids were drinking. They were drinking and driving and dying, and that really lowered the life expectancy. There was a lot of alcoholism up there, and that negatively affected the life expectancy. If you could have survived into your 80s, of course, then whether you were an American Indian or whether you were a white person in Blaine County, Montana, um, you still, I mean, you could live just, the native people were living just as long as the white people were. The three countries in the world with the highest life expectancy are Japan at 80.7, Andorra, which is a tiny little country between France and Spain, 83.5, and San Marino. Oh, there you go. San Marino and Andorra are both in the Pyrenees Mountains of Europe, and that's a mountain range between Spain and France. San Marino, 81.1. Andorra has only 68,000 citizens, and San Marino has only 27,000 people in them. Flagstaff, of course, has 72,402 people, and Gallup has 21,854. So that just gives you an idea that these countries are smaller. Well, than Gallup is smaller than San Marino, but not by much. Life expectancy in the United States is 76.5. The increase in the life expectancy in the United States is partially due to the decline in infant and child death rates in the United States over the last 50 years. Heart disease has been cut in half in the last 30 years. Death during childbirth is rare, but it's actually increasing, as strange as that may seem. Being female is a factor in longevity. 58% of people over 65 and 70% of the people over 85 are female. While life expectancy is a theoretical speculative number, longevity is actually the length of time an individual lives. Many people desire longevity, but most fear extended chronological age, the actual number of years, and decrepitude, the inability to function on one's own. Biological age is the physical age of the body in comparison to the chronological age. The longest recorded lives have been in the 120-year range. Many gerontologists, literally old man studier, feel that 110 to 120 years is the upper limit of human genetic endurance. However, with advancing medical research and less traumatic lives, other scientists are predicting longer and longer lives. Many scientists see no reason to place a fixed limit on longevity of humans. What people look like tends to be genetically dictated. Thus, people from one group may look old at 30, while another group maintains their skin elasticity and hair pigmentation into their 60s and 70s. And I told you about my friend on Fort Belknap who had jet black hair, didn't dye it, didn't do anything to it, and here I am running around, and I was just a couple months older than him, or maybe he was older than me. Anyway, my hair is gray and his hair is just jet black. And we were almost exactly the same age. Young adults tend to have smooth, taut skin, and their hair has color, fullness, and sheen. Today's 20-year-olds are taller than their parents, and they tend to reach sexual maturity earlier than in past generations. This trend is believed to be due to improved nourishment, health care, and less physically stressful lives. Most young adults tend to be quite appearance conscious. They tend to maintain a slim, lean physique and wear clothes that accentuate this aspect of their appearance. One of the strange things is yoga pants. Yoga pants are so popular now. Just about everybody wears them. It's a little bit. It's interesting because in the old days you never ever saw somebody with such tight pants on, but now lots of people are wearing them. As individuals approach middle age, their appearance tends to change. Skin elasticity decreases and facial expressions begin to mold people's faces into character lines. Both men and women begin to suffer from middle age spread, men tending to take on a spare tire, and women to grow larger thighs. Fat replaces muscle, and that's exactly what we see here and here. Wait a second. There we go. By late adulthood, physical changes become more obvious. Skin loses some of its color, hence the desire for tan skin among Europeans, and becomes splotchier. It begins to hang in folds and wrinkles and takes on the texture of parchment. Varicose veins may form in the legs, hair may turn white and thin, hair may begin sprouting in odd places, ears for men and chins for women. Individuals may begin using plastic surgery, heavier cosmetics, or Botox to rid themselves of age lines. They may deny their age and seek symbols of youth. They may take on younger lovers. Structural and functional changes. The joints are protected by a smooth protective cushion of cartilage called the meniscus. With age and use, the cartilage deteriorates and the smooth surface becomes pitted. The bones become less dense, especially in women who have menstrual and partum, which means birth, drains on the calcium supply that may leave the bones brittle and porous. Calcium is constantly being replaced, but in women, bone density loss begins to occur in their 30s. Male calcium loss in the bones doesn't begin until they are in their 60s. Estrogen plays an important role in keeping blood calcium levels normal. In women, the estrogen promotes the absorption of calcium from the blood and into the bone. When estrogen levels fall, women no longer have the protection of estrogen to protect their bone mass, and that's when osteoporosis may occur. One of the most vulnerable bones to the female is the hip bone. A woman over 65 has a 1 in 5 chance of breaking her hip. Large bone fractures take much longer for an older individual to recover from than a younger individual. My wife has 2 artificial hips. That was from something that happened to her in the military. And the fact that, it's genetic. Osteoporosis or porous bones is a disorder of old age where the bones become thin and brittle because of calcium depletion. 1 out of 4 women in the United States suffer from it. Most of them are white. Vitamin D has a lot to do with this. Why do they have different skin tones? White people, of course, have a difficult time absorbing vitamin D. or they have to absorb vitamin D. They should get out in the sun in order to do that, but sometimes they don't, of course. And therefore, they can't convert calcium to bone tissue. It is estimated that 1.3 million fractures in 1.3 million fractures a year in the United States are the result of osteoporosis. The spine is especially susceptible to the problem and is characterized by the classic hunchback posture. And that's due to the ability for the vertebra to stand straight. Or to actually, it's an S curve. It's an S curve. Osteoporosis is more prevalent in white females and more pronounced in women of fair skin and small frames. Proper nutrition and exercise that begins in youth and is followed throughout life can help prevent osteoporosis. Smoking can exacerbate the problem in that it ties up vitamin D that is needed for the proper function of calcium. And of course, it is that's the hunchback. Arthritis is a general term that refers to inflammation of the joints. Arthritis is common in older individuals, but it can be found in younger people as well. Nearly half the people over 65 suffer from some form of arthritis. Osteoarthritis is the most common type of arthritis in the aging. Osteoarthritis represents inflammation and swelling in the joints. It is also common for this problem to be present when the joints begin to degenerate. And that's what's happened in this individual's wrists and in their knuckles. Yeah, those are their knuckles. Rheumatoid arthritis is a crippling disease that progressively destroys joint tissue. 70% of the cases appear between the ages of 25 and 70. It affects 75% more women than men. Cartilage becomes damaged and the joints become deformed, sometimes fusing together. And that's what has happened to this young lady. And that's what's happened to this young lady. Especially in her wrists. Wow, that's a mess. Most people detect little effect of aging on their sensory motor systems until they reach the age of around 50. At that point, hearing losses become more obvious. This is known as presbycusis, and the lens loses its flexibility, causing presbyopia. Presbyopia is usually in the form of farsightedness and may require reading glasses. That's what I have to wear in order to see. Well, I can see. I can drive without glasses, but I can't read without glasses, unless there's a lot of light. As the individual ages, it becomes more likely that a disease will cause excess pressure in the eyeball, damaging the optic nerve, a condition known as glaucoma. Now, curiously, I do not have glaucoma, but my brother does. I have a brother with glaucoma. And he has to put eye drops in his eyes every day. As people reach middle age, many of their senses begin to decline. Besides presbyopia, some individuals may suffer from a yellowing of the lens, which filters out green, blue, and violet lights, making color acuity poor. If the lens clouds and becomes opaque, cataracts will form, making vision blurry and out of focus. 1.3 million cataract operations are performed in the United States every year. Older individuals will require more light because of pupil problems, and that is the problem that I tend to have. Now, the interesting thing about cataracts, once upon a time, and it wasn't that long ago, it's only 50 or 60 years ago, cataract surgery was not that easy. You had to go in and scrape off the opaque portion with a scalpel. It sounds horrible, and it was just as horrible as you think it is. Now they do it with a laser, and it's much, much more rapid and far less dangerous. Now it's outpatient surgery. In the old days, we used to keep those people for 2 or 3 days with their heads stable so that their eyes would heal properly. So they couldn't move we had to patch up their eyes and they couldn't move their heads for fear of bleeding or whatever. As people drift into middle adulthood, the sins of their past often will catch up with them. If they have not maintained a healthy diet or maintained a frequent exercise regimen, these practices may haunt them in middle age as damage to their cardiovascular system. Atherosclerosis is the buildup of plaque in the walls of arteries that may block or slow blood flow from a fatty diet. Arteriosclerosis is a loss of elasticity due to the hardening of the arteries from lack of exercise, and that can be a really serious problem. I told you about my friend who was a smoker. He'd been a drinker earlier in his life. Had the same. We had the same heart attack, not at the same time. I had mine in 2010. He had his in 2016. Because he was a smoker, and because he was lazy and rarely exercised, he died of his heart attack. And his heart attack wasn't nearly as severe as mine was. But I'm a weightlifter. I'm not really a bodybuilder. I just lift weights 2 or 3 times a week, once or twice a week. And I walk and run, and I survived mine, and he did not survive his. He died. Because of athero and arteriosclerosis, blood pressure is raised. Blood pressure naturally increases with age, but genetics in these conditions can lead to chronically elevated blood pressure or hypertension. This can lead to kidney disease, heart attack, and stroke. Hypertension can usually be controlled through improved diet, exercise, or medication. The system that tends to show the least wear and tear from aging is the digestive system. However, as an individual enters middle adulthood, digestive problems can arise. Ulcerative colitis, absorption problems leading to poor nutrition, gallstones, ulcers in the stomach, ulcers in the duodenum, hemorrhoids in the rectum and anus. And this is what a ulcer looks like. This is this guy's stomach. And this is one that's forming, and this is what has happened. This is a fully formed ulcer. So you can imagine eating something. I mean, that's raw right there. So is this, but that's a much thicker hole. He's got a problem. Yeah. Another digestive problem that tends to occur during middle adulthood is type 2 diabetes, where the cells of the body become insensitive to the body's insulin. Type 2 diabetes becomes a problem with people who carry their fat in their gut and lean toward obesity. There is also a genetic component to this problem and is seen in select populations, especially American Indians. And there you go. Type 2 diabetes may be associated with age, with obesity, with physical inactivity, the fact that you were diabetic during pregnancy, if you have a family history of diabetes, high cholesterol or high blood pressure can cause it as well. One of the most significant aspects of a female's life is her menstrual cycle. For 40 years, a woman's monthly cycle floods and depletes her system of hormones, controlling her reproductive capacity and, in some cases, controlling her moods and affecting her behavior markedly. During ovulation, when intercourse is most likely to produce a pregnancy, a woman's sight, hearing, and sense of smell are the most acute. During menstruation, all of these senses are the most dulled. In other words, during your period, your sight, hearing, and sense of smell aren't very good, but when you're ovulating, they're very good. Menopause takes place when a woman permanently stops ovulating and menstruating. Menopause usually occurs about a year after a woman's last period. Often women will ease into menopause over a number of years when their monthly cycle begins to become erratic. This is known as perimenopause. Peri just means around. The process begins about age 30 when a woman's production of ova begins to decline. As a woman approaches her 50th birthday, she begins producing less and less estrogen. Menopause occurs when the ovaries no longer produce enough estrogen to sustain full menstrual cycles. In 80% of women, menopause occurs between 45 and 55. 75% of women experience little to no physical discomfort due to menopause. The most common symptom is known as hot flashes, sudden contractions of blood vessels causing blood to flow to the surface of the skin. Some women have hot flashes constantly, while others have none at all. Other symptoms of menopause include vaginal dryness, vaginal burning, vaginal itching, urinary problems, and vaginal infections. Menopause causes the vagina to become shorter and narrower, and the walls become thinner and less elastic. Lubrication diminishes, which may cause discomfort during intercourse or irritation to the bladder. Vaginal secretions become less acidic. Since the acidity of the vagina protects the woman from bacterial and yeast infections, she becomes more susceptible to infection. Oddly, the more sexually active a woman is, the less drastic the changes in her vagina during menopause. Other symptoms of menopause include joint pain, muscle pain, headache, insomnia, fatigue, dizziness, weight gain, and constipation. Since the hormones that control menopause are the estrogens and sexual desire is controlled by testosterone, menopause does not decrease sexual desire. However, when vaginal changes create discomfort during intercourse or the woman suffers from other interfering health problems, menopause may mean a decline in intercourse. Some women may go through a sexual adjustment where physical responses aren't as extreme as they had been before. In the male, testosterone begins to decrease beginning in the late teens. By age 70, testosterone reduction has reached between 30 and 40%. The lower testosterone and other sexual problems may lead to an old age of impotence. The prostate gland may swell and make urination difficult and erection incomplete. As males wander into their 50s, they may begin to feel their physical decline and waning testosterone level. They may experience depression, anxiety, irritability, insomnia, fatigue, weakness, lower sex drive, erectile failure, memory loss, reduced muscle and bone mass, and body hair in strange places. Many men, as they age, greatly fear the loss of their sexual potency. It isn't true that as males age, they naturally lose their sexual functioning. This is basically a cultural idea. Very often, the lessening of sexual activity is due to non physiological reasons: monotony in a relationship, preoccupation to business or financial worries, mental or physical fatigue, depression, failure to make sex a high priority, fear or inability to perform. Physiological problems include diabetes, alcohol, and medication. Male sperm count begins to decline when a male is in his late 40s or early 50s. Erections tend to become slower and less firm, orgasms less frequent, ejaculations less forceful. It takes longer to recover and ejaculate again. 39% of 40-year-old men experience some sexual dysfunction. 5% of men in their 40s are unable to get and hold an erection. 67% of males over 70 experience some sexual dysfunction, and 15% are completely impotent. Erectile dysfunction may be caused by diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol, kidney failure, depression, neurological disorders, alcohol, drugs, smoking, poor sexual techniques, unsatisfying relationships. And of course, this is known as male climacteric. I didn't mention that before, sorry. Aging does not have to spell the doom of a couple's sex life. With many couples, menopause is liberating since the couple no longer has to worry about unwanted pregnancy as a result. The bottom line is that age has nothing to do with sexual drive and desire. Sexual expression may change its focus as a person ages, but couples are able to have sex as frequently as they want to have it. In many families, middle-aged mothers tend to have the role of kin keeper. the person who gathers people together for celebrations and keeps them in touch with one another. Sometimes middle-aged parents are referred to as the sandwich generation because they are sandwiched in between aging parents and difficult adolescent children of their own. During middle adulthood, successful adults are able to maintain their mental capacities by adapting to their circumstance through selection, optimization, and compensation. They are selective as to what they do, they optimize their abilities, they compensate when necessary. By using SOC, the individual is able to maintain their level of competence, regulate their losses by reorganizing their functions, and growing through adaptation. By focusing on what they are good at, middle-aged individuals are able to develop expertise, extensive experience, knowledge, and understanding of a specific area of interest. The antithesis of expertise is a novice, someone with very little experience, knowledge, and understanding of a specific area of interest. People with expertise may have a wealth of knowledge in an area, but will only use a small amount of that knowledge in any one situation, an aspect referred to as conditionalized knowledge. Even experts have different levels of competence. Individuals who have expertise that is basically routine is referred to as merely skilled experts. Those experts who can not only answer routine questions about their subject, but have such extensive knowledge that they have adaptability, flexibility, and creativity are referred to as highly competent experts. Highly competent experts become problem solvers in their field and can create strategies to expand their knowledge and develop new skills. This is known as adaptive expertise. Working memory is a kind of notepad in the mind for storing information in the short term so that it can be dealt with. In fact, working memory used to be referred to as short-term memory. Working memory only holds from 5 to 9 chunks of information at any one time. Working memory can be enhanced if the individual arranges the information in larger chunks. Still, the working memory can only hold information for about 30 seconds before it begins to decay and possibly distort. Another enhancement tool that is frequently used is rehearsal, where the individual re-enters the information into the working memory by repeating the information. Researchers feel that as we age, the capacity of our working memory tends to shrink. Shrinkage tends to have a great deal to do with the complexity of the task required and the technique used in memory enhancement. If the individual is using rehearsal as their memory technique, they tend to show very little decline. Any information that requires more sophisticated memory enhancement tools such as reorganization, elaboration, or mental manipulation, there is greater decline. Some researchers feel that as a person ages, they lose attentional resources. They have less ability to maintain their attention on a select item. However, other researchers cite motivational lapses that might preclude an older individual from trying too hard on such nonsense. Scientists have recently been researching how select information is processed. Explicit memory is conscious or intentional recollection, most often facts, names, events, or other things that people can state or declare. Implicit memory is memory that occurs without conscious awareness, most often skills and habits, throwing a ball or riding a bike. Brain scans of people recalling implicit memory shows that there is a specific memory pathway that takes place when recalling this information. There have been some interesting findings looking at the effect of the sex hormones and memory. Dealing with animal studies, researchers have discovered that increased estrogen levels, as with birth control pills and hormone replacement therapy, actually decreases a woman's spatial reference memory for location and space. Looking at male subjects, they found that when they increased testosterone, they increased spatial reference memory, as weird as that may seem. Many parents, especially some women, so strongly identify with their mothering role that when their last child finally leaves the house, they may suffer from bouts of loneliness and feelings of worthlessness because their role has changed from the center of their children's lives to the periphery. This is the empty nest syndrome. Fathers also may suffer from empty nest in that they may regret not having spent more time with their children. Do opposites attract? Well, not usually. Most people fall in love with and marry someone much like themselves. This is known as assortative mating. In fact, people who are about equally attractive are the most likely to develop a close relationship. Lovers often resemble each other in physical appearance, attractiveness, mental health, physical health, intelligence, popularity, and warmth. They're likely to be similar in degree to which their parents are happy as individuals and as couples. Couples tend to be similar as to their socioeconomic status, race, religion, education, and income. They often have similar temperaments. They often have similar interests. Researchers have found that people are usually more cognizant of why a failed relationship dissolved than why they got together in the first place. And here we go. Do people look alike? Are they equally as attractive as one another? Good question. But the amazing thing is, if we look at all of these people, most of them even have the same color hair. You have to look at her eyebrows to tell what color her hair is. Oh, I don't know. You can see she's about that color of hair. They have the same color hair. She's the same way. You have to look at her eyebrows or this hair here. They have the same color hair. They have the same color hair. She's got darker hair than he does. They've got the same color hair. 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 Of course, neither of these two couples are still together. Later years, the ability of older couples to handle the ups and downs of marriage results from mutual supportiveness, intimacy, sexual and emotional, interdependence, sharing of tasks and resources, the partner's sense of belonging to each other. In the United States, the average age of grandparents at first grandchild is 50 for women and 52 for men. My grandson was born in 2012, and I was 63. Minorities usually achieve grandparenthood at a younger age than whites. 75% of older Americans are grandparents. 40% are great-grandparents. Families are getting smaller. They're about a third as large as they were at the turn of the 20th century. In developing countries, the role of the grandparent is one of counselor and financial benefactor. In the United States, grandparents often act as teacher, caretaker, role model, and negotiator, but this is only about 15% of grandparents. Involved grandparenthood represents 15% of the grandparents. They are involved to the extent of disciplining or correcting their grandchildren. They give advice. They discuss the children's problems. They are consulted on important decisions concerning the child. They exchange help with errands, chores, and projects. Younger grandparents, those who see their grandchildren almost every day, and those who have a close relationship with the child's mother, are more likely to be involved. Grandparenting styles may differ with different grandchildren and at times in children's lives. The most involved years tend to be when the grandchildren are pre-adolescent. One researcher from the 80s sees grandparents as family watchdogs. They often stay on the fringes of their children and grandchildren's lives, rarely playing an impactful role unless there is a need. In a crisis, they will step in with financial or emotional support. One study in 1987 found that 14% of preschool children were under the care of grandparents during the daytime. Grandmothers tend to have closer, warmer relationships than grandfathers with their grandchildren and to serve more often as a surrogate parent. The mother's parents tend to be closer than the father's parents and are more likely to become involved in a crisis. Grandmothers tend to be more satisfied with grandparenting than grandfathers, though grandfathers tend to be warmer to their grandchildren than they were to their own children. Many feel that it is a second chance to do a better job at parenting than they did with their own children. 7% of children in the United States live in households headed by a grandparent. One-third of these children have no parent present in the household. In some low-income areas of the United States, an estimated 30 to 50% of children are living in kinship care, living in households with grandparents or other relatives without their parents. Many of these children may have behavioral or learning problems due to their parents' abuse of alcohol or drugs. 68% of grandparent caregivers are white, 29% are black, 93% of single grandparent caregivers are women, 40% of grandparent caregivers are poor and just about above the poverty level. Two-thirds of the custodial grandparents report a greater sense of purpose in life. Often the age difference between the grandparents and the grandchildren can be a barrier between them. They may feel anger or guilt for raising children who do not take care of their own children. They may feel that it shows that they themselves have somehow failed as parents. Age discrimination refers to denying someone a job or promotion solely on the basis of age. The Age Discrimination Employment Act of 1986 protects workers over 40. This law states that people must be hired based on ability rather than age. This law will not allow employers to hire or fire using age as their sole criteria. The law also keeps employers from segregating or classifying employees using age as the basis for this classification. Research shows that the idea of retirement is not universally accepted. The responses fall into three categories: those who are so attached to their work that they cannot imagine retiring, those who are looking forward to retirement as an opportunity to do things that they hadn't done before, those that have mixed feelings or hadn't yet thought much about retirement. I'm here. This is me. I'm one of the individuals that can't imagine retiring. In Germany, only 3% of older adults still work. In Japan, the percentage of older adults still working is 28%. In the United States, 16% of older men and 8% of older women are still in the workforce. In 1900, 67% of men over 65 are still in the workforce, and this is mostly because of Social Security. If they survived long enough to be over 65, then they didn't have any money to take care of themselves. They had to retire, or they had to continue to work. In 1950, 50% of men over 65 were still in the workforce. Individuals who continue working tend to be better educated than individuals who retire and tend to be in good health. Many people finance their retirement in various ways: social insurance or Social Security, universal pensions. Some countries automatically give each retired individual a pension. Voluntary pension plans. Most companies in the United States and Britain are allowed tax deferments to maintain a pension fund. And provident funds, similar to Social Security, but people get it all in one lump sum after they retire. While many people do prepare for retirement, just under half don't even think about it. But even the individuals who plan tend to aim too low. Savings programs need to be maintained at higher levels than most people are maintaining them. What do people do after retirement? Many maintain supplemental paid jobs. People who were self-employed before retirement tended to work at least part-time after retirement. Volunteerism, 1 out of 3 people over 75 do volunteer work. 40% of all retired people do volunteer work. Leisure, people tend to find a focus after retirement. Some people maintain a family focused lifestyle that means moving closer to grandchildren. Some people maintain a serious leisure where they must maintain skill and concentration in their endeavors. About 11% of the U.S. retired people live in poverty. This is down from 35% in 1959, and the vast majority before Franklin Roosevelt passed the Social Security Act. After retirement, age often dictates poor health, but the vast majority of people are fairly healthy, both mentally and physically, until just before they retire. Erickson's 7th crisis occurs at least by the beginning of the middle adulthood and lasts until retirement. The crisis involves whether the individual will guide the next generation or whether they will focus on their own needs. This crisis is often resolved as soon as the individual decides to have and raise a family. People who put off relationships and a family are often too self-absorbed to care about generativity. In 1968, Robert Peck looked at Erickson's idea of generativity and expanded on how people change their focus as they enter middle age. And this is Robert Peck right here. Valuing wisdom instead of physical powers, socializing instead of sexualizing human relationships, concentrating on many people rather than investing all of one's time on one individual, and mental flexibility instead of mental rigidity. And that is the end of the lecture. So I will talk to you next week, I think.